Hmm. Hello? No, actually, I can't come out and play tonight. Jeez. Weird. Hey guys. Today I am here to review, you guessed it, Prom Night from 1980. So, Prom Night was directed by Paul Lynch, who had already directed two feature length films and a TV episode, so he was already somewhat experienced. He went on to direct a ton of TV shows and a fair amount of films as well. For lead actors, we have the legend himself, Leslie Nielsen, and the always stunning Jamie Lee Curtis, who was in John Carpenter's The Fog that very same year. She brings a decent amount of charisma, and the rest of the cast aren't too bad either. The film made almost $15 million off of a $1.5 million budget, so this was a pretty successful venture, and I'm surprised it didn't get some sort of a sequel. It did, however, get a 2008 remake that was quite successful but not well received among horror fans. Paul Lynch had been wanting to direct a horror film, and he came up with a concept after one of the producers suggested a holiday themed story. Not sure how a storyline centered around a high school prom came out of that, but it did. Lynch initially had trouble finding investors to fund his film, but after securing Jamie Lee Curtis, his troubles were over. She was the rising star this film needed, and Lynch was excited to work with her. Jamie had not made much money this far in her career, and she really wanted this role, and I think it shows. Most of the other actors were Canadian theater performers, and this was a Canadian film, by the way. The production crew were pretty fresh at the time, and the fairly elaborate dance scene at the high school prom was choreographed by Lynch's sister, and she did a great job. This is a slasher film, but Lynch did not want excessive violence. The distributor had to make it a little more graphic than he had originally wanted. So it's not the most brutal slasher out there, but there's a pretty cool beheading scene, which is definitely my favorite part. Prom Night received mostly negative reviews by critics and was considered unoriginal and too similar to Halloween and Carrie. I get that, but I don't really agree, and I think it has enough of its own ideas. Legendary film reviewers Siskel and Ebert were harsh on it, which is not surprising since it's, after all, it's a horror film. Some reviewers gave it some credit, at least, for it being a fairly well-shot film, which, again, I agree with. To this day, it has fairly low IMDb and Rotten Tomatoes scores, even if it is considered a cult classic. The story starts with a group of kids bullying a classmate, which causes her to fall out of a window and to her death. Clearly this was not their intention, but it was still their fault. They all decide to not go to the police in fear that they would be in trouble. 6 years pass and they are now in high school, and the kids involved start getting random creepy phone calls, and it appears that someone is targeting the group of kids that were responsible for the girl's death at the beginning. Is it a family member? Who's doing this? Clearly someone that knows what happened 6 years ago. To me, what kind of differs this from other slashers of the 80s is that the killer has a clear objective, and that is revenge. Most slashers of the time just had a killer killing people for no real reason. I mean, I suppose you could argue that Jason had a reason in the Friday the 13th films, but that wasn't nearly as personal as this is. So as far as my thoughts go, I do like this movie. Some people absolutely love it, and some people think it's boring. I guess I'm somewhere in the middle. I definitely don't think it's boring. I think it's well written, I think it's well acted, and I think it's well directed. Some of the actors are better than others here, but again, these were young people with mostly just theater experience, with the exception of Jamie Lee Curtis, of course, who I wouldn't really call the main character, as you might assume. She has a bit more lines and is, in a little bit more scenes than the other kids, but barely. That said, she does a great job, and she's likable as always. And without spoiling anything, I thought the killer angle was pretty smart and gives the film a little mystery. Normally I prefer, a bit more gore in my slashers, but I think the film is overall strong enough to keep my interest the whole way through. I'm going to give Prom Night a 6.5 out of 10. What score would you give it? Are you a massive fan? Do you think it's overrated? I'm curious as always. Cheers, guys.